And everything's starting up. Good morning, everybody. This is Dennis Eversen. I'm over here in the Axe Media Group headquarters and offices. I am here with Wen Chen. We're going to be talking about science today and the pursuit of truth. So happy to have Wen here. We met last year on Lynn Morris's show, Changing Times. You were talking about human organ harvesting and some of those things, some of those issues you see. And I did want to share with everybody that's local, at least, well, everybody. Lynn Morris is the presiding commissioner over in Christian County, and people in the area know, people other places may not. There were two police officers that were shot and killed on Monday, two others injured. So there's a lot of things happening there. So please, those of you that pray, keep them in your prayer. And if anybody wants to give to the families or something, go through the Christian County Sheriff's Office. Don't take up some GoFundMe or something that somebody else puts up. Make sure it's going to a place that has oversight so it gets to the families. But keep all that in your prayer. And one of the things Lynn loves to do is to share social issues, people that are making changes in the area. And when we met and you were sharing on that, one of the things I loved about your story was just your heart to learn and explore, and then as you learned more about your culture in China and all of that, your desire for others to learn and hear. So, um, just share a little bit for those that don't know you, just a little bit of who you are right now, and then we'll go into the story about science.
So my name is Wen Chen, and so good to be back, Dennis. I was born and raised in China, and I came to the United States in 1994 for graduate school. And after I received my PhD in biology from California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California, I accepted the offer as a staff scientist. So I'm a research scientist, not a faculty. And focus on research. And I've been working for Caltech since then, since 2000. So I have spent already like 30 years
Mhm.
at Caltech, 5 years as a graduate student and 25 years as a research scientist. And I'm going to talk about my science journey later. But
Yeah.
besides my science career, I'm also an activist for human rights in China. I'm a member of Amnesty International, focusing on human rights issues in China, and I'm an advocate for Chinese traditional Chinese culture. So now it's like a Lunar New Year time.
Yeah.
So every year I craft a talk at Caltech focusing on one subject in Asian culture. So this is like my annual journal club. That means like I study for like a long time,
Yeah.
one subject, and then I will give a lecture um, about one subject. Like last year, I spoke about the history of tea. Like, the
Yeah.
tea you drink every day, where
Right.
they came
Yeah.
from, what is the history, how did the tea culture evolve from dynasty to dynasty and in different countries, like how
Oh,
the
yeah.
tea in Japan started, right? Like how the tea in like Mongolia was
Oh,
their
it was
culture,
a
and what's the
huge
tea culture
economic
in.
driver, wasn't it, in so many places?
Yes, yes,
Commerce
yes.
and even probably wars and stuff, right? I mean, just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the subject of last year. And this year I spoke about Chinese medicine and
Mm,
meditation. So
yeah.
that was also a long history in China that also deeply influenced other countries in Southeast Asia and East Asia. So has been a lot of fun doing this
Yeah.
at Caltech besides my science work. Um, but all of these I do this because I'm a biologist. I'm also a information scientist. So I have been making a living by reading all these years. I
Yeah.
read cutting edge literature of biology, and I extract the information. But I can
Yeah.
go through details later.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's incredible. I know several individuals that can do that in different areas, history, different things, where they can consume that material and I don't know, embody it, have it inside of them in a way that they can share and utilize it in a good way. And that's an amazing talent. My brain is not very linear, so information's all over the place. So to do that, that's not me. And I really admire that about you. And one of the things that stands out with your story to me is the importance of knowing our stories, right? We all grow up with being told our stories and maybe hearing or thinking we know. We have influences that want to affect the story and share it in a different way. But for us to investigate and to learn our own stories, to know our ancestors, how we got here, where did this history, our ethnic, cultural, governmental, whatever it is. Because as we know those stories, then we can find out who we are, find our place in this world. And then we get to have conversations with others that are different from us and learn their stories and the things that are the same, the things that are different. We all laugh the same, we all cry the same, but we speak different languages. We look different, we dress different, we have different cultures, different traditions, all different things. But the thing that you'd mentioned before to me as your desire to move into science was you really wanted to discover um, something more, right? Kind of you saw it even as almost like a spiritual path, right? As you were excelling in education and those things, but I guess those seeds were planted by your father, I guess, right? In that story.
Yes.
So I think that's where we're going to start, right?
Yeah. I think everyone has a unique path and everyone has his or her own gift. So I think my story starts from my father. Actually, both my parents were very well educated in China. Um, they both went to top universities and they were both talented. But unfortunately, by the time they finished college, it was the beginning of China's Great Cultural Revolution. That was in 1966. And that was a huge political movement for the Communist Party to wipe out intellectuals. Because the idea of the Communist Party was that anyone got educated can have independent mind, independent thinking, and then they can see that the government is making mistake. They can protest. They will say, oh, the government is wrong. So the strategy uh, to have a cultural revolution is like if Chinese people are not educated, then the Communist Party, the power will be solid, right? Like nobody can criticize the government and they can be
They can
easily
tell you
brainwashed.
what to believe, tell you what the truth
Yeah.
is. And just a little shout out for everybody. Pay attention because this is where it is in lots of countries, really in so many areas, right? It's very common for people in power to want to do their thing and to influence and all that. So it's not just something that's affected your story. It affects all of our stories on some level.
Yes, yes. But I would say like my parents' story is like a total tragedy. If you think about their education background, especially my father and his college major, originally his career plan was to become a nuclear scientist. But right after college, he was taken to a coal mine and dig the coal for around like 10 years. And he was separated from his wife and my mother. And that means like he was in one province, my mother was in another province. And they were only allowed to see each other for like 2 weeks per year. And that was how my mom raised me and my brother, almost like a single parent. And they were only allowed to be together because my father's health deteriorated. He had a stomach disease caused by malnutrition, and doctors had to remove 3/4 of his stomach. So he
Mm,
was only in his 30s at that time, and he already lost most of his stomach, and hospitals were not even sure that whether he can survive. And that was when the government, the Chinese government, allowed him to move to my mother's place so that okay, your wife can take care of you.
mhm.
And miraculously he survived, right? And then
Wow.
that was how our family eventually got together. But he was so traumatized. Both of my parents were so traumatized, like they had a weird feeling about education. I think deep in their heart, they know that education is good, that it gives people freedom. Like, it was wonderful. And they kept all the books. In my parents' house, they had a huge bookshelf with a ton of books.
Mm.
And they never touched them, but they never abandoned them. Like they carried the books with them whenever they move, but they never read them. So my brother and I read all of these books because we were so bored at home. We read all of them. And I actually, both of us were born with talent on science. When I was 2 years old, I was already able to count, and I can
Wow.
easily count beyond 10 when I was 2 years old. And then my father was so impressed because they kept telling me the story. Like I say, you were such a strange child, because at that time he wanted to teach me how to count, and his expectation was like, if I can count above 3, he would be very happy.
Yeah.
But he was just trying to say, okay, if you count, I'm going to give you candy. And I didn't care about candy.
Yeah.
And then said, if you count, I'm going to give you this very cute mini watermelon. And I didn't care about that mini cute watermelon. And then he got angry. He said, if you don't count, I'm going to beat you up. And I got scared. I immediately counted, and I counted all the way to 10, just immediately. And my dad was so shocked, and he didn't know what to say, because you are not supposed to count above to 10 when you are
Right.
2 years old,
Yeah,
right?
he's
Usually,
supposed to
like,
be
kids
teaching
can't
you. You're
count.
not supposed to know already.
Yeah, but I knew all of this. And I remember, like, when I was in elementary school, I remembered all the numbers. The numbers were just my friends. Like, I remembered, like, everyone's birthday. And I remember, like, once you tell me the number, I just get them immediately, like, as
Mm.
if, like, the numbers were my language. And my math was very, very good. And I never need to spend the time to study. I can easily get the full score. And so, but my parents had such a mixed feeling that they didn't want me to go to a top top school, because they didn't want me to stand out of the crowd, right? So they took
Yeah.
me to a very bad um, elementary school, and also a secondary school where they know all the teachers, they know all the principal, but it was very bad school because very few people finished there and went to college.
Yeah.
So the idea was like, okay, you are number one here. So what? It's a terrible school. You are
Yeah.
still terrible, right?
Nobody's
Even
gonna
if you're like a
notice.
number one.
You're
Yeah,
you're the
it's
you're the
like,
best of the worst, right?
yeah. So like I say, okay, this is great. Like, even if you are like, yeah, we cannot stop you from getting full scores, but it's a terrible school, right? You're
Yeah.
not supposed to go anywhere. And but I did excel, of course, and of course, like, I was always the best student, and and but like socially awkward.
Mm.
I was the kind of people that people thought, that all students and all teachers thought I was an alien. My
Mm.
parents also thought I was strange, because if you have talent
Right.
something, like on STEM or something, and
Yes.
you can be terrible on everything else.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, yes, I was very, very good in academia, but like, social wise, emotional wise, I was very, very sensitive. I didn't know how to talk to people. It was so awkward that everyone thought I was bizarre. And my parents were not that close to me either, because they also thought I was kind of strange child, not like very
Yeah.
typical girl, right?
Right.
So I mean, it was not a very pleasant childhood. And all the happiness I got was from reading. So when I was not
Mm.
happy with my family, when I said, like, was so lonely, I would read. I read everything, especially like books about math, about science, because I can read textbooks like reading novels. Can you believe that? Like, because it was so much fun reading all
I
these
I
textbooks.
I can believe it, but I can't quite picture it.
Yeah, because I can see the thing behind the teaching.
Yeah.
And I just remember when I was in high school, because it was a very bad high school, right? So like, nobody had any hope to any student. And but when I was in like 10th grade, China started to join the science Olympiad. So like, that means like they would select the most talented kids from all high schools, and then the best one from the country, and then send them to international competition.
And this
So
is
it
not a
started from
small
your
country either. It's there's a lot of
yes.
competition, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like so it was like you start from your city, right? If you can, win the top
Hmm. Yeah,
like how many 10 maybe in the
yeah.
city, you go to the province like a state, and then you go to the national. So at that time my chemistry teacher just say, okay, since you are the best student in our school, right, like you should just give it a try. And then but to give it a try, that means like I have to study chemistry, right? And the chemistry teacher just had no hope, just didn't expect anything from me. Say, okay, I don't want to waste my time teaching you. Like, here's a key to the lab. So she gave me the key to the chemistry lab. Can you believe it? I
Yeah.
was 16 years old, a 16-year-old 10th grade student, right?
Hmm.
And I got the key to the chemistry lab. He said, you can play with everything in the lab. So I went to the lab, I take out this bottle of like a chemical, say, okay, it's going to explode if you throw it to water. And this bottle, okay, if you digest like a 1 millimicrogram, you're going to die. Okay. So,
Have
so like
fun.
I spent like, I know. So I use this equipment, I play with them. I had so much fun. I was so happy that I didn't blow up the accident,
So
didn't get into
you didn't
accident.
blow up is the end of that story, right? You're still here. So
Yeah. Yeah, so I was all by myself, right? Like, the chemistry teacher just say, okay, here are the textbooks, you read by yourself, just do whatever.
yeah,
Like,
if
we
I
are not
had
a
a
good at
key to the
school.
chemistry lab at that age, the lab wouldn't be there anymore. That would not have been good.
Yeah, but I had a lot of fun. Like I just like read a textbook, say, oh, you can do this experiment with this like equipment and
Yeah.
with those chemicals, and then I would mix things together, create
Yeah.
different color, do all kinds of
Right.
experiments by myself, and like kind of like I figured out everything by myself. That
Yeah.
also embedded a problem in the future when I really went to the competition, right?
Oh
So I went
yeah.
to a competition. I remember like it was like my mom went with me actually because I was only 16. I cannot travel by myself. So my mom went with me to that competition, and it was a truly weird experience as well because um, my mom was a very persistent woman. Like she's very quiet, but she always had this idea that if you decide to do something, you have to finish it no matter what.
Yeah. Always
And that
finish something.
deeply influenced me.
Yeah.
And I remember like the first time I took the competition. Okay, I went through the state. Actually, I went through the city. I was like a top 20 in the city because at that time they used the high school chemistry to test us. And I was okay because sometimes I was careless, I made a mistake. And so those kind of easy tests, I do not do so well.
Yeah.
But then because like they gave like it was the capital of the state, that means they gave us like a top 25 can go to the state level. So I was between 20 and 25, I was allowed to go. But we didn't expect much, right? Because I was
Mm.
probably not the best.
Yeah.
So my mom went with me to the state competition. From our home to the test site, it was like a 2-hour bus ride.
Mm.
And then in the middle of the ride, the bus broke. So we were
Oh.
stuck there in the middle. Okay. We can either like go back home or like
Yeah.
we go to the test site. It
Yeah.
would take the same amount of time. And I wanted to give up already because it was like not so pleasant to walk for one
Yeah.
hour to the test
Yeah.
site and then you figure out a way back. And my mom just said, okay, we're already here. Okay, let's
Oh
just
yeah.
do it. Let's just finish it.
You're
So we
gonna
just
you're
had to
gonna
walk.
finish. You already made the commitment, so yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had to walk. So, if we walk, it took longer, right? So
Oh yeah.
like we barely made it. So when we arrived at the test site, the test already started, and we had to tell the teachers like, okay, we're late because the bus had problem and we had to walk here. But the teacher said, okay, like we're going to Xerox your test paper because we didn't expect you to show up. They didn't prepare enough test paper. So but I said, okay, I just want to finish it. I was
Yeah.
like 15 minutes late, so I started late, but I I just like, they had 2 sheets of test paper. It was very strange because I didn't recognize any of these problems. They were not taught. They were not high school chemistry. They tested us with college level chemistry,
Uh,
and I never seen those kind of problems before. But the trick was, when I was in high school, I told you I read textbooks like reading novels.
yeah.
So when I read all these chemistry textbooks, I kind of figured out a theory of how to solve the problems of organic chemistry. And I actually wrote this theory out into a 2-page paper. And I gave it to my chemistry teacher. Say, I developed this theory. If you follow my logic, you can answer the questions 100% correct. And at that time, the chemistry teacher encouraged us to put our comments or statements on the bulletin board of the classroom. And she didn't allow me to post it. She said, this is not scientific. You have no proof of your theory. Although like the result is 100% correct, you cannot publish this. But, at that particular test site, right? Okay, at the state level, I saw all these weird questions. There's
Okay.
no way you can solve them. Use high school chemistry teaching. I said, okay, I'm going to use my theory to solve the problem. So I just used my theory. I wrote out all the steps on a scratch paper, because when they had this competition, they want to see every step how
Yeah,
you solve the
they want to see
problem.
your work, right? They want to know how you got there.
Yeah, so that they know you are not cheating, right? So I just solved all the problem with my own private theory. And and then I just finished it. I went home. That was it. I didn't think much about it. And then about like a couple of weeks later, someone came to our school, announced that I won the first prize in the state level. And so my theory worked because I solved like 100% of chemistry questions with my strange
How did you feel
answer.
after you took the test? Did you feel like you had found the answers on them, that it had
I
worked,
think
or
so. I believe that I found the
yeah?
answers of them, but I thought everyone else probably also
Yeah,
knew it.
yeah, no better or worse than someone else, probably. Just
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Because to me, it was so straightforward, right? I read the textbooks. I knew it was okay. This is how it works. And I expected everyone else knew it.
sure.
And although I just thought it was
Especially at that
bizarre, they
level,
don't,
right? They didn't get there because they didn't know anything. They got there because they knew
yeah,
something.
yeah. And then like, but of course it was a surprise. And then I was taken to the state level, and then later to the um national level. And then the problem is like, at the national level, they not only test your theory, they also test your experiment. I mean, I
Ah,
actually had pretty good hand. If you think about it, like I played in the lab all by myself. I didn't create any accident.
yeah.
But the trouble was like, in the national test, they test your theory first, right? The first day they test the theory. And that same night, they graded all the test papers. Everyone knew I was the first place because I answered all the questions correct. And they was very surprised. So the second day, but I didn't know. The second day they did the lab, like they tested all the equipments and how you can use the equipments at the college level. Those were the equipments I had never seen in
Yeah.
high school. And that was a problem because, in the high school chemistry lab, we had these equipments,
Hmm.
but we don't have all the equipments like that they use in college. In college, they have a kind of called analytical scale. It was like very specific, kind of very um, complicated device
Hmm.
that you can measure the weight to like 3 digits after,
So
decimal, like very,
kind
very,
of, is it something like in the line of a spectral analysis, but in weight or something like that, or like a
yeah, yeah,
real
yeah, yeah.
specific? Yeah,
But I had never seen that before. I
yeah.
had never seen that equipment in my life, right?
I'd
So I
never
can
even heard
easily
of it
pass.
myself.
I know, but like, but the problem is like, if I was by myself, maybe
Yeah,
I would calm down and figure out everything by
yeah, you would
myself.
have figured
But
it
I
out
was
eventually. Yeah,
eventually, if I spent longer. But the problem is like, all the teachers, all the judges already knew I was first place in
yeah,
theory. So I was, everyone did experiment. I was surrounded by like 20 people
yeah.
staring at me, looking at every step I did. And I just couldn't focus with that going on. And so like the result was like, I scored first in theory, but I couldn't do experiment.
Yeah.
And everyone's surprised. So how come she couldn't do experiment? Because at that time, to prepare for this competition, almost every student, they would take a college level class at a high school. But because I came from a very bad high school, I never took any college class. And
Yeah.
you said like chemistry teacher just gave me the key and walked away,
You're
right?
pretty much just self-taught for the
Yeah,
most part. Yeah.
that was that was it. And but nobody believed that I was self-taught
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they didn't believe that you can self-learn college level. And I didn't even access college level chemistry textbook.
Right. Yeah.
I had never read college level. So I figured out everything by reading high school
Yeah.
textbook.
Well, yes.
So
So
that
it's
was truly
from the
bizarre.
knowledge you had, and then that ability to make that theory, to understand the process and utilize it. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, you shouldn't be able to do that.
No, no. And nobody believed that I figured out everything by myself. And I didn't realize it was different because I saw that everyone can figure out this by
Of
themselves.
course.
So I
Yeah.
didn't really explain much to them. And so the teachers, right, the judges, they were hesitant because if they based on my grade, I should go to the international competition because I was so good in theory, but I couldn't do any lab. So they asked me one question, just one question to make a decision. They asked you, do you like chemistry? And I gave a very honest answer. I said, I already spent 6 months studying chemistry and I'm so sick and tired of it. I don't want to do it for the rest of my life. I mean, was wasn't it honest? I mean,
Yes.
that was true, right? That was how I
Yes.
felt. Like I spent so much time reading this, like doing all these problem sets, and
Right.
I sort of had enough. I already learned everything about it, and I can
Yeah.
figure out
I'm ready for
everything
the
by
next
myself.
thing. Yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah. And then they just gave up me. They say, okay, she's probably too nervous to do lab. She probably knew how to do lab, but she was too nervous. Like, she's not mentally stable to go to international competition and she's not interested. So let's just get her out of the list. So that was the end of my science Olympiad journey, right? I finished at the national level, but because, I was at the top level, I immediately got offers from all the top universities. I was told like you can choose any university in China, any major, they will accept you. And that was how it changed my path, right? It was a miracle, basically. Like, I was away from the control of my parents. Their original plan was like I finish high school and go to like a very local small community college,
Yeah.
get some education, then find a local job and stay
Yeah.
there forever.
Yeah.
But then I was out of their control. I went to a top university. Then I eventually came to the US for graduate school. And so basically that was the journey like of how I became a scientist, right? Like I
Mhm.
always had this wish when I was a child. I remember when I was 6 years old, all the kids played together. Everyone say, I want to be a bus driver when I grow up. I
Yeah.
want to be a teacher when I grow up. I want to, be a businessman or something. And I said, I want to be a scientist. And everyone was feel like it was so bizarre. What is a scientist? Who
Yeah.
cares about a
What
scientist,
do
right?
they
In
even
China.
do? Do they even have jobs?
Yeah,
What is
yeah. And when I was 6 years old was like late 70s, right? In China, scientist was
Mm,
not a good position. It
mm,
was a position that the government do not like, right?
mm,
And it was like a dangerous position. They can chop your head at any time.
yeah.
And but I think like I was influenced by my father somehow, like because he
Mm,
kept saying, "Oh, I know. I used to think I can be a nuclear scientist." He
yeah.
kept saying that. Like he had
Mm,
such a conflicting expression about education, but I knew he
yeah.
admired the scientists. I knew that. And even though they had a mixed feeling, they didn't want me to go to a top university or something. They always supported me to read. And I remember when I was in elementary school, my father subscribed like a journal called Astronomy for me.
Mm,
It's very strange at that time, like a parent would spend money to
yeah.
get this magazine subscription so that I receive it every month to read about astronomy.
Yeah.
And when I was in middle school, when I was interested in astronomy, my father and my brother, my older brother, who's 5 years older than me, they built telescope for me, use
Yeah.
wasted material. Like, they had good hands. They are both
Right.
engineers. They had good hands. Like they built a telescope for me. So was all these was supports, like, like although like they kept telling, okay, you don't want to become a top, but they supported everything I did. And my mom walked with me all the way to the competition. Just think about
Yeah.
like how much support they
Uh,
provided me to
yeah.
make it happen, right?
That had to be very hard for them because they want the best for you and they want you to be educated, but they also know that if you move too far down that path, it could cost you your life, literally, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
and so that dynamic, and then they know what they suffered, right? The
yeah,
separating, not being able to live together, what your father was in the coal mine, all of that, just nothing good came from their education, kind of. So it's
yeah.
hard to want to pass something on that's good, but didn't bring good. And it's fascinating though that the things that were instilled in you, right? That ability with numbers, that access to the books, right? I mean, your people you knew around you, how many even had books in their homes, right? That wasn't very common. Just those small things sometimes that are in our stories in our lives that give us something that uh, direct our path in a way that can be just amazing. Isn't it amazing how these little things just led to something more? And then as you're moving forward in the education and you're wanting to go into science, you went that biology path and all of that. So
Yeah, it was kind of a compromise, right? So I was interested in astronomy, very, very interested in astronomy. I used the telescope and I observed the stars. I did my log every day,
yeah.
and that was my huge hobby. But because I excelled in chemistry, so everyone suggests me like you should take the path of chemistry because you're so good at it.
Hmm.
And you know, your physics is not as good as your chemistry, right? So you should go to the direction of your talent, right? But I was so tired of chemistry already, so eventually the compromise was bio,
Yeah.
right? Because biology is a brand new field. There's so much things we don't know.
Yeah.
So that was the path I took as my major. But you know, I was not an ambitious person. You know, I always followed the course of nature, right? Like it just happened naturally. So
Right.
even though after I went to a top university, I did not expect myself would leave China until in my junior year. So right after I went to that university, you know, all of a sudden I was together with the very best students from all over China. You know, it was called like a Caltech of China or something. All the students excel. So I remember the first year, like we all like kind of competed, like who will be the top ones, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Oh,
we were all
sure.
the best from our area, but
Yeah.
now who is the best? Like all these 50 students in my class. So I remember like the first year, the end of the first year, I was like ranked like the third or the second in the class. And number one studied so hard that he became ill.
Uh,
He had to spend a year away from college to
oops.
recover. And I thought like this is terrible, right? This
Maybe
is
there's a
terrible.
better
If
way to figure this out. Yeah.
I know. I thought like this is terrible. If all I compete is to get a higher score than the rest of the kids and get myself sick, I don't want to take this, do this for the
Yeah,
rest of my college life.
that kind of takes the
So
fun out of it.
no, 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 no. It's just terrible. I just saw like after the first year, I saw like, okay, I need to take other challenges, right? You know, the curriculum, the class was not a challenge to me. Like, you know, I can deal with that, but I want to take some challenges that are like beyond the requirement. So my aim is like I wanted to graduate early. So that was a 5 year college. You have 4 years to finish all the classes, then fifth year you do the thesis. Like
Mhm.
basically you do lab. You have to finish your college thesis. So I said, like, if I can finish all the 4 years course in 3 years, then the last year I do the thesis, then I can graduate in 4 years. So that was my challenge, right? And to take the challenge, that means you have to take more course.
Yeah,
But it's already full. How can you take more course?
that's a
And the
lot.
trick is like they allow you to exempt. Remember, I was
Mm.
very good at
Oh
chemistry,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the rule was
What do
like,
they call it? They called it clipping out, or there's different ones where you can. Yeah.
yeah. So the rule is like you can take the final exam at the beginning of the school year. If you can pass, get an A, then you don't need to take the class. You directly get the credit.
Okay.
So because I was very good at chemistry, right? And also most of the classes are related to chemistry. So
Right.
I can just give it a try. And also they have prerequisites. That means if you want to take biochemistry, you have to finish organic chemistry first. So then you have second year organic chemistry, third year biochemistry. You have to be able to skip some classes.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you cannot graduate
Yeah.
early. So, and organic chemistry was my best part. So I remember I I took this exam test for organic chemistry and I passed. I got an A, and that was it. Like I was allowed to take a biochemistry theoretically according to the schools, like
Right.
university's rule. But what happened was it was in China at that time, corruption was already a problem in academia, right? To take as a sophomore to take a junior class, I
Mm.
have to be approved by the department secretary in charge of the curriculum. And everyone said, you have to bribe that secretary to take that class. I said, why? Isn't her job to approve
Right.
any student who qualify? And I qualified, right? And how come I cannot take? Why do I have to bribe her?
Yeah.
And I just insist, I'm not going to do anything like bribing anyone. I just want to take the class. And not surprised, right? She said, I cannot take the class because I was not good enough. Okay. I was like a top student in my year,
Hmm.
and I was able to pass that organic chemistry exam without taking any class. I get an A, right? And she said I was not good enough. And so, but I was stubborn, right? I just said, okay, I'm going to prove to you whether I'm good enough. So I went to that class of juniors. I was a sophomore. I went to the juniors biochemistry class. I sat through the whole, lecture. I took their exam of the first uh, term. We have term
Hmm.
fall term and spring term, like just 2 terms. So I took the 4 terms exam together with all the students because the teachers didn't know that I was not approved to take the class. They just gave me the text paper. So
Right.
I did all the homework. They graded everything. I took the test and I got the highest score in the junior class. And then I took my test score. I went to see the department chair. I said, okay, the secretary said I was not good enough. Here's my test score. I got the high score in the junior class. So can I get the credit of this biochemistry class? And the department chair, he was just shocked. And then the result was that he gave me the credit for that 4 term. And then he told the chemistry teacher, do not let her take exam again.
Yeah. Don't let this happen anymore.
Yeah. So see, that was so bizarre. I went through the second semester, right? Second term. And by the time to take the test, the teacher looked at me and said, I'm so sorry. I cannot give you the test paper. All right. That was the end of my sophomore year. And I think I learned a big lesson,
Mm.
much bigger than learning biochemistry, right? I know what I can do, but I also saw the system. It was only university. It was only a university in China. I was not even in the Chinese society. And the university is already so corrupted that if you do not bribe a secretary, you are not allowed to take a class. And even if you are the top one, they would not let you to take the next test
Mm.
just so that they can wipe you out, like just because they don't like you. And I already knew that I would not be able to survive in China
Mm.
after college because it's only going to become worse. And that was the second year I finished sophomore. I decided I wanted to leave China. So
Mm.
I spent 1 year studying TOEFL and the GRE. Those are the tests, English tests for you to leave China and apply for graduate school. And that was a transition in my science journey that uh, I made up my mind to leave China to pursue higher education in other countries. So I was not accepted by Caltech the first year I applied. I was not accepted directly apply from China because it
Mm.
was very hard. If they don't interview you, they just look at everyone's application.
You,
Everyone's
you're just
application
looking
looks
at a
perfect,
piece of
right?
paper. Yeah. It's yeah.
Yeah. So first I went to a medical school in Texas, in Dallas, Texas. And after I went to Dallas, Texas, in that medical school, applied for transfer to Caltech. Because if I apply for transfer from Dallas to Pasadena, I can be interviewed. And then like that eventually allowed me to get it to Caltech. And I finished my PhD at Caltech and then stayed there. That was
And it
now you
isn't
get
that
the whole story
yeah,
of how
yeah,
I ended up
yeah.
here.
Oh, that's awesome. But isn't that fascinating how there's a system in place there that doesn't want somebody to excel and do well? I mean, as a university, wouldn't you want your students to do well? And if they're able to do well, encourage them to keep going further to learn more. Especially when that student goes on to do things in academia, science, wherever, you're the one that trained them. You're the one that
No,
helped them. You're the one and for it to be the opposite doesn't make sense in education, does it? It's so backwards.
it doesn't make sense in education, but if you think about it, I was a troublemaker,
Yeah,
right?
you were. Yes,
I
you
was a
were.
big troublemaker
Yes.
because I refused to bribe the secretary. I didn't follow the rule
Yeah.
to bribe the secretary. And after she rejected me from taking to take the class, I insisted to take the class. I got a top score and I challenged the department
Yeah.
to give me credit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're
So
not working
so
with the
like
system and you have to work with the system. You got to be part of the system. You got to go with the system. You got to, what's it going to hurt you? You just go with the system. Yeah. Yeah.
but I think I always had this principle. I just saw like it shouldn't be that way, right? You know, from all the books I read, that was the worst part about it, right? From all the books I read, that was terrible,
Yeah.
right? All the books about history, about like a philosophy, like we learned something about the truth, right?
Yes.
We learn about like you're supposed to be honest. You're not supposed
Yeah.
to use your like your privilege
Hmm.
to take advantage of your privilege, right? Like, the
Yeah.
department secretary shouldn't use the opportunity to collect money from students who want to take
Right. Yeah.
class.
Yeah. Any of those positions, especially overseers and stuff, the best way to fulfill those roles is to be a servant, right? To empower the others, not to push down on them or to, but to bring them up, to lift them up, to find where their place, to help them find their place. Because every one of us has so many different unique talents and gifts and abilities, and to encourage that, to help that grow is so important.
Yeah. And also I feel like everyone's action can either encourage or suppress this kind of corruption.
Yeah.
And I always admire those who, use their small action, day-to-day action to turn this society to a better direction, right? So I still believe that I did the right thing by refusing to bribe that secretary, even though like I couldn't get that credit
Yeah.
of that
Yeah, yeah.
course.
There's a lot of people that will disagree with you on that, but it was the right thing for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was so bizarre. I remember like years later that department chair, right, came to Caltech to visit. And
Mm.
I saw him. He said, "Why don't you come back to China to work?" Right? I said, "Are you going to give me the credit of that course?" And he said, "Of course, we're going to give you the credit of that course." But I said, "Too late."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a good point.
I already went through that.
So,
But I think that was the foundation when we talk about the pursuit of truth, right?
yeah,
And I think like that was I think like in the pursuit of a science career, like I think that is also like the spiritual path since the
mhm,
very beginning, right? Like as a scientist, like I think my impression about scientists when I was a child was like these are the people who seek truth. And I think those probably very old school. Like nowadays, I'm not
yeah,
sure if scientists still pursue truth, but that was
yeah.
what I originally
It,
saw, like Einstein,
yeah,
Newton, right? Like
you kind of saw science as a spiritual pursuit, right? Like
yeah.
because you're looking for truth. You're looking for what's real, what you can verifiable, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but with this as my principal, right? That kind of guided the path. Um, and also eventually I was involved in the work about human rights and everything. And I'll have to mention the idols I had while
Yeah,
I was a
yeah.
child, like how I became really like a admired scientist. I remember my father uh, gave me that magazine subscription about astronomy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was a Chinese magazine, and there were two authors who regularly published articles on that astronomy magazine. That one magazine was geared towards teenagers, and they were the top astrophysicists in China. The couple is like husband and wife. They were both top astrophysicists in China, very famous. But their articles were very easy to read. Like I was only in elementary school. By reading their articles about astronomy, astrophysics, I became so fascinated. You know, I was so attached to astronomy that described the world, the universe. And I truly admired them. They were my heroes. I saw one day I want to be like them. I wasn't even sure if one day I can be there, but I said one day I want to be someone like them, to encourage students, young students to be interested in science. And it turned out that they were both activists for human rights in China.
Mm.
Remember the Tiananmen massacre in 1989? And these two professors, they were leaders of this movement.
Mm.
And so they were also top wanted people by the Chinese government after the crackdown
Oh,
of the Tiananmen massacre. And the Chinese government has been searching the whole country, trying to arrest the professors and the students who organized the protests.
right.
And these two professors, they were top scientists. So they went to the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. They actually stayed in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing for 1 year
Wow.
so that the Chinese government cannot arrest them. And eventually, the U.S. government negotiated with China, allowed them to leave China.
Mm.
And they went to University of Arizona, I believe, and they taught there until they passed away several years
Mm.
ago. It has been like a
Right, yeah, yeah.
35, 37
Yeah,
years.
there's years in the story, right? Decades in the story.
Yeah. But what was fascinating was that the university I went to was also the university they used to teach in China.
Mm.
Isn't the life interesting?
Yeah.
But when I went to that university, that was 1 year after the Tiananmen massacre. They already left.
Mm.
So I kind of followed their path, right?
Right.
Followed
That's
their footprints. I
fascinating.
went to the university they used to
Yeah.
teach, and I looked at their mailboxes. They still had their mailboxes
Oh,
in the
wow.
university. That was so interesting to look at those mailboxes, and
So,
nobody
so
ever
at that
show up
time,
there.
you haven't mentioned this before, so I'm curious. At that time, when you went to the university and you're seeing their names and that, did you know anything about what happened to them?
I
Um,
knew, but I only knew the Chinese government version.
yeah. So
I
you
only
thought
knew
they
the
were,
Chinese government version.
so how did that work? Because you kind of idolized them. And then if you're
I
hearing
know.
this negative, how did that play out for you?
I was just very puzzled.
Yeah.
I was very puzzled. I said, how could this be true? They were so good at writing
Yeah, you read
science
so much
articles,
of their
right?
stuff, you would think you know them from their writings, right? So you would think,
Yeah, yeah. But I just I just saw I was so confused. Why, right? Because
yeah,
the other professor said, "Oh, they're so stupid. They're
yeah,
so stupid. They sacrifice their career for something so meaningless."
yeah.
But actually, nobody said anything bad about them. It was
Mm,
interesting because when I heard about these professors, there was also a chemistry professor. They were astrophysicists, right? There was a
mm,
chemistry professor uh, who went through the same problem. He was also laid off. So at least I knew at least three professors in that
mhm,
university who lost their jobs because of that. But when I was there, their mailbox was still there, right? Everything you
mhm.
saw their name,
Yeah.
and the other professor would say, "Oh, they're so stupid. They did this and that. That was so meaningless." But still, I admired them as scientists. right?
Right.
And I didn't care much about other things, but I still admired them as scientists. And as a matter of fact, people do not want to tell us a lot about what they did. We
Hmm.
knew that they were student leaders, right?
Right.
But what exactly they did,
Yeah.
nobody
What?
wanted to give me the details. Like we knew like the Chinese government wanted them, but
Yeah. They did
exactly what they
something
did,
bad.
right?
What was it? What was this bad thing? What was this?
Yeah. So it was kind of ambiguous and did not really damage
Yeah.
my admiration
Right.
towards them. And of course, after I came to the US, I figured out the whole story.
Right.
Then, I respect them very, very much
Yeah,
for
then you're
their
able to
courage
resolve that
and wisdom.
conflict. Yeah. I that's
Yeah,
really
and
kind
their
of a
wisdom.
good,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good illustration in that sometimes when there's a lot of confusion around us, it's probably we don't have all the facts yet. It's part of it, right? Sometimes that
Yeah.
can help
And
take
their
care of the
wisdom, like they
confusion.
knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, they knew what the government was going to do, and they knew how to figure out a way to to leave China, right? Just think about it, these scientists,
Oh,
right? They held press conferences during the Tiananmen massacre, right? And talk to all these reporters.
Yeah.
And nowadays when I get interviews about human rights in China, I also had the same feeling. I kind of knew how they felt
Mm, yeah.
at that time, right? Like as scientists, you speak on issues, social issues, and I just feel it's our responsibility. Like in Chinese culture, if you're intellectual, that means you have responsibility for the society. You
Hmm.
get educated, that means you're responsible for the society, and that's how you pay back the society. Your education is not for you to get profits,
Yeah.
benefit yourself. Your education is for you to serve the society.
Yeah, I think of that with a culture that understands elders, right? Those that are
Mhm.
older have that learning, have that wisdom, have that history, all of that to be able to pass down to the next ones.
Yeah. So, okay, we still have 10 minutes left, but I
Yeah,
just want to tell you a little bit about what I do. It
yeah.
is also quite interesting. When I came to Caltech, I eventually, you have to choose between different labs. You can try different
Hmm.
projects. Eventually, I settled in a lab that study nematode. Not earthworm. Nematode is a tiny, tiny worm that's only 1 millimeter long. You can only see them under microscope, but it's the smallest animal that we can study.
Mm.
It's called C. elegans. Elegans, C. elegans. That's its
Okay.
official name. We also
Yeah,
call it worm.
yeah.
So it's a very famous animal in the biofield because in biology, you cannot use human to do experiments. That's why people study animals. Not
Hmm.
every animal, but what we call model organism. That means these animals are easy to raise in labs and easy to manipulate to do experiment and reproducible as well. So
Hmm.
C. elegans is the smallest animal. It only has 1,000 cell. It takes 3 days to get a new generation,
Mm.
and the whole animal is transparent. So you can see how this developed from one egg into a whole worm, how they divide.
Mm.
So it's a very good system to study development. It's also a very good system to do genetics because you can use chemical or a radiation to damage the chromosome to cause mutations.
Mm.
And then you can find out where it's broken and you can know which gene do what function, because if you knock out one gene, the animal will be not able to move or
Sure.
become very short or become
Mm.
very long or something.
Right.
And then you can figure out the gene function. It's also a great system to study aging, because if you
Mm.
see how something can affect aging in human, you have to wait 100 years, right?
Yeah, yeah. Three
And in
days
a
is a lot
worm,
quicker, right?
yeah, 3 days. It's like the whole,
Yeah,
life
yeah.
is right in front of your
So
eyes. You
you
can
can
see
do
everything within.
generations of experiments. You can see.
Yes, and if you see if a chemical what how a chemical can happen to an animal right after 20 generations,
Yeah.
you cannot do. See, like we always say, genetically modified food is bad for human, right? But people argue, say
I,
nothing has gone wrong yet,
yeah. How do
right?
you know?
Because it will take if something can happen 10 generations, you
Yeah.
have to wait for several hundred years to
Yeah.
see if this will affect humankind. but you can test the worm, right?
Yeah.
20 generations, like what, 3 months?
Yeah.
You can see 20 generations, see what happens after 20 generations. So
Nice.
it's a great system
Yeah.
to study transgenerational effect. So you can do a lot with that. And there's a lot of research going on. And my PhD graduate school, we did like a behavior, like basically we check like if you lose this gene, how can you affect neuron function, and how could this neural function affect its behavior. Like
Hmm.
we're talking about 20,000 genes and how each gene can affect anything, and how the combination of two or three can
Sure.
affect anything. So these are like a huge amount of information. If you look at how much information there, like we are looking at the whole field of worm study, there are about 30,000 publications we
Hmm.
call like research papers. And each research paper have like several hundred experiments.
Oh yeah.
And nobody in this lifetime can read 30,000 papers and
No.
remember everything. And that is what I do. So people like me, we form this encyclopedia at Caltech. Like
Hmm.
it's a project to read every paper and take information, the experimental results. We build this encyclopedia so that whenever you look for something, you can find all the experiments associated with all the conclusions. And
Nice.
of course, like I can't read 30,000. I read some,
Yeah.
then we train machine.
Yeah.
We train machine to read like us.
Yeah.
So we are just the ones creating the rule, and then we write code, we train machine. And
Nice.
that has been what I do in
Yeah.
the past 30 years. So
Yeah.
it has
That's
been a fun job. And I use the same skill to read Chinese literature and craft talks about Chinese culture.
yeah. That's awesome. So what's one of the most interesting things you've noticed in these studies? Kind of throw you a
In
curveball here.
these
Yeah.
studies,
Yeah.
I would say, I would say, I'm sure like everyone have their preference, but
Hmm.
I'm the most fascinated by the study of transgenerational effects.
Hmm.
Transgenerational effects.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I started to pay attention to that years ago because one of the professors told me about his work. And so he was able to knock out, like delete a gene, right? Delete a gene, and everything looked normal. So he just keep raising the animal generation after generation. Somehow, after 28 generations, there's no more progeny. And he
Uh-huh.
said, I probably made a mistake, right? He said, I probably made a mistake. How come I lost everything? So he started again
Right.
and repeated. And after 28 generations, everything's gone. And
Wow.
then he said, okay, this is probably not a coincidence. Maybe this effect, if you lose this gene, right,
Hmm.
everything's normal until generations later.
Yeah.
So he studied the mechanism and he realized, okay, there are some mechanisms that do not immediately affect your this lifetime, but it will take
Yeah.
effect after 20, 30 generations.
Yeah. I think of
We call it a
even
transgenerational study.
yeah the time that's involved to see that the way it passes down. Even if you were using mice or something, I can't even imagine the time it would take to get to that far down. So that's, and to realize that it may take some time to see it. I was thinking of I was watching a show on some of the earlier nuclear experiments and different things, and how they would have soldiers so close to the radiation. They're like, well, it's not hurting them, and they're wiping it off with a broom, and stuff, and they're like, yeah, there's no ill effects, and it's like, uh, you might want
Yeah, I know.
to spend a little time investigating. And then we look at all the things happening in our country, or around well, especially here, but around the world, things like autism, things like that. And you go, okay, there's
Yeah,
something going on. So these kinds of studies can be so helpful. It's something you may not see the result right away, but that generational thing, that's fascinating.
yeah. I would say that is what I'm paying most attention to. And that's also what I try to highlight in my work
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I have a little bit of privilege to highlight something,
Yes,
right? To bring
absolutely.
it to the public. And that's all not just like, genetic disease, but we're talking about a lot of science policy nowadays. Like people make genetic modified bacteria, release
Hmm.
them to ground, right? Like,
Yeah.
they say, okay, it's been like 20 years, everything's fine, right? But if you think about what can happen to after 20 generations, and I think that really we should bring this to the policymakers
Yeah.
I just say like, it is possible for us to do these experiments and tests, especially using little worms, right?
Yeah.
To see what can happen after 20
Yeah,
generations. We have to keep this in
especially when
mind.
they're releasing things out into the environment, right? You're releasing something new, something
Yeah,
different than what it was. So you really should have a pretty good feel for how it's going to affect things, as best as possible, right?
yeah. I do feel like, there are a lot of problems nowadays in the science policy as well, like because I have been in academia for many, many years. And I do know the old schoolers, like, people like me or like much, much older than me. I mean, they pursue science as truth, like,
Yeah,
but that's probably not the case anymore. In modern society, I see
yeah,
many people become scientists because they want to get money and the fame. And I just feel like the current system is not encouraging because, when you apply for grant, right,
yeah.
you always want to say, oh, I'm doing something novel, something
Mhm.
new.
Right.
But, you know, something new that also means risk, right?
Yes.
And I think like if the funding agent, like the US government, only look at something new but do not think about the consequence, that could be a problem, right? Like
Right.
you say, okay, we can go faster, but it's just like uh, genetically modified babies, right? Like
Right.
anyone now can edit the genome, right? You can make,
Yeah. Yeah,
genetically
we'll just make a
modified
little
mouse.
tweak here and a little tweak there, and your kid's gonna have this color eyes or whatever they're trying to do. They'll be so.
Yeah. So the technology it has been there for many, many years, but
Hmm.
we don't do that because we know the consequence. Because once you touch the genome, you may introduce mutations,
Yeah.
accidentally introduce mutations, whether you know it or not knowing it, and then like these will get into the gene pool of humankind,
Yeah.
right? And then once it get into the gene pool, it may cause problem in the future, maybe a new genetic disease, or
Hmm.
maybe something very, very bad,
Yeah.
like that gene that the professor knocked out in worm, right? After
Right.
30
Yeah.
generations, something happened, right? So you don't want to do that. Like there are a lot of technology that are new, that looks fancy, but that can cause disasters. It's like
Yeah.
we talk about the gain of function study of virus, right?
Yeah.
And we all talk about the COVID. And so that COVID virus, how the Wuhan lab is modifying SARS virus to make it able to infect other animals. And all of this, the technology has been around for many, many years, but we cannot do it because of the risk. And if you only think about what is new, what is fancy, what can make you famous, that can, I think that can become disaster
Hmm.
for our humankind.
Yeah.
And I hope like the
Yeah.
conversation about the science eventually can lead us to think about these big
Hopefully.
problems, big questions
Yeah.
of our society.
Yeah, I think yeah, I guess that's a good place where we can kind of leave it for people to think about is, hey, let's consider what we're doing with stuff. Science is the area we're talking about, but it's in all areas of our lives, making sure we know that what we're doing is going to have good results. Let's
Uh,
and on some of that stuff, especially when they're going into new fields and trying new things, keep it in the lab and let's make sure you know what you have in the lab before it ever goes anywhere else. And maybe on some things that maybe need to consider whether we even need to experiment in some areas, I guess, and stuff. So a lot of
or
good
if we have
questions.
other,
Yeah.
yeah, or if we have better approaches
Yeah.
that may not be so novel but more safe, right?
Right.
And when we talk about the lab, right, and also like lab safety is always a problem because even though
Yeah.
you have the best lab, accidents still happen,
Yep.
right? So like because human can make mistake,
Human error,
and the lab
equipment
equipment,
malfunctions. Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah.
So there's always a risk. I would say, yeah, I would say like science policies
Yeah.
is a big thing. Like you need to have the balance between technology and public safety, I would
It's
say.
it's it's like when you're doing an experiment, you want it controlled, right? You want it.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. This is where we're doing it. Let's, yeah. So Yeah, that's awesome. Good encouragement and things to think about. So, any closing words and thoughts you have on your journey? I love the pursuit. I love just all those little things that kind of set you up on your path, and then the choices. And I love your mom saying, "Let's finish," right? You
Yeah,
know, how easy it
yeah.
would be at that right halfway there going, let's go home. I mean, I've gone home sometimes on journeys, not finishing, but I've always tried to instill that in my kids and do it myself, finish it because man, you don't know where it's going to lead. Amazing. That was a
Finish it
huge,
so that there's no regret.
yes. Amen.
So
Amen.
I think my conclusion is that if I look back how I end up here, I'm very happy that I always followed my heart
Yeah.
and followed the course of nature. And I think that's also our Chinese philosophy, like, follow your heart so that you don't regret your choice, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like I didn't choose chemistry and I have no regret because I wouldn't be happy if I become a chemist.
Right.
And also follow the course of nature because sometimes you just cannot force it. And I think
Yeah.
opportunity will come eventually if you wait. If
Yeah.
you wait until the best timing, it just naturally happens. But like before that, you just accumulate your power or your knowledge. You be
Yeah.
prepared for that.
Yeah.
But opportunity eventually will come because after all, I believe that it was all arranged there,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
And yeah, it's so incredible too. And don't just submit to the systems around you. Sometimes it's okay to just say, wait, I don't know if this is the right thing. So, all right. Well, thank you, Win. We will talk again soon, I hope. And Happy
thank
New
you.
Year.
Yeah.
And
Happy Year of Horse.
yes,
Thank
yes.
you. Take care.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Signing out.
Goodbye.
Bye.
That is great.
Yeah. Yep.